There's more Macbeth in this.
Oh, of course there is.
So we have to go back to...
Oh, my God.
We
If
have to.
If you remember the floating Banquo theory that I offered a few weeks ago, with the time jump, all the successive time jumps, I think you could argue at this point that the Banquo, the guy who has the sons who could be king, who's arguing for his own lineage now, I think you could argue that applies to everyone who now has kids.
Sure.
That theory's almost exploded by the number of time jumps.
So
Because
everyone is Macbeth.
No, everyone's Banquo. Only Viserys is Macbeth.
Yes.
Because it used to just be like, is it Otto? Is it Daemon? And now, for people who have kids who are worried about, well, my kids need a good line of standing in the succession, that includes Otto, Alicent, Rhaenyra, Daemon, Corlys, Rhaenys. They're all contenders there. So, at this point, Viserys' death might resemble Julius Caesar more than Macbeth. It might be a Knives Out situation, but... There is a new Macbeth scene that is being remixed into this episode, and I think it took me a second because it wasn't as apparent as the last few. Like the last episode had I argued the Burnham Wood coming to the castle, and that was the fire at Harrenhal. The wood coming to the castle, the wood creates fire. This episode is remixing, or this episode is remixing an earlier event from the play, which is actually the big inciting incident for the play. It's the thing that topples the Jenga tower. It's the murder of King Duncan by Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So for a little context in the play, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are plotting to kill the king while he's staying with them for a few days. Macbeth enters his chambers at night with a dagger and kills him, and then he goes back to Lady Macbeth, and she's worried that he didn't make the scene convincing enough and that he might be a suspect. So Lady Macbeth goes back in to, make sure the guards are dead and put the dagger in their hand and frame them. So that's sort of the context. But we know that these translations, if they're intentional at all, are never literal or one-to-one. The pattern in House of the Dragon that I've tried to point out for 7 weeks is boiling down a pivotal Macbeth scene to its core elements and remixing them. So if I boil down the context I just gave you, we have an incomplete royal murder, a safe haven castle, Lady Macbeth escalating a dagger-based work of bloodshed. So let's go through those individually. 1, an incomplete royal murder. You could argue that both Aemond and Rhaenyra experience incomplete royal murders because they're both maimed but survive. And
also, Laenor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Laenor appears to be murdered, like Duncan, and Carl is kind of framed with that duel scene that they stage.
Is his name really Carl?
Yes, but with a Q. So he takes the place of the guards in Macbeth.
Okay.
To the next element, the safe haven castle.
Yeah.
Here, it's Driftmark, but in Macbeth, it would be Dunsinane. And Dunsinane is a fortress on a hill. And we see the whole surrounding area here for Driftmark. And that safe haven castle is violated. So Corlys finding, apparently, his dead son in the morning is the same as the scene in the play where Macbeth, quote-unquote, finds the dead Duncan the next morning after the murder. The last element is the dagger and the Lady Macbeth escalating dagger-based violence. In Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, who I'm arguing is pretty much Alicent here, Lady Macbeth preps the dagger, and Macbeth tries to get cold feet and back out, and she just emasculates him until he goes and uses the dagger on Duncan and kills him. And then Lady Macbeth is the one who returns to the scene of the crime to plant the dagger. Here, similarly, Viserys resists any violence in this altercation with the kids, and Alicent goads and chastises him, basically emasculating him publicly in front of most of his cabinet and aristocratic friends. And then she accelerates. She doubles down on the violence by demanding a child's eye. Similar to Lady Macbeth saying at one point that she'd dash a baby's brains out to get what she wanted.
That's right.
And aspire to having the proper lineage of kings. And then she takes up the violence herself when she takes the dagger, like Lady Macbeth taking the dagger back to the scene of the crime to frame someone else for the violence. Alicent takes up the knife in an attempt to formally indict or condemn Team Rhaenyra for treason, for attacking her son, who she's positioning as a rightful heir.
Well, that's great. That's
Okay.
just excellent.
Now,
Why don't
I will-
you go fuck off?
I will actually engage with this theory.
Okay.
So for our dear listeners, the reason why these are Cam's theories, individually a lot of the time, is that he has this built-in Shakespeare knowledge base. And, I've read a lot of Shakespeare, so has Maggie, but he's lived in this world for so long that it's hard for us to sort of play with a lot of these ideas because it's been, a long time since we've seen or read these plays. And so they're not as ingrained in the immediate knowledge stores to pull from. So they're incredible insights. It's just hard sometimes to have a something to push back with. However, today I do. So if what we're looking at initially or originally in the play is Macbeth and Lady Macbeth conspiring to kill Duncan, would the analogs here not be Alicent and Otto as the Lady Macbeth stand-ins for Viserys in this case? Haven't the tables turned just a little bit at this point in time? Because if the king that's like on the chopping block, so to speak, like we asked with our poll today, is do we think that Viserys is in danger of being murdered? And I think if he is, the most likely conspirators for that are going to be Otto and Alicent and all of the quote-unquote Greens, right? So, has Viserys shifted a little bit from being that Macbeth character to being more of a Duncan character?
I totally think so. That makes a lot of sense. Like, it's because he's been so emasculated and so basically powerless for a long time. I think that is that natural transition, and that makes sense because Otto is so ambitious and he's overly ambitious. That's his whole problem. That's why he was fired in the first place. We could talk about why on earth Otto has been brought back. That's an interesting debate or question I want to answer. But I think Otto is really starting to occupy that role, which is fun in this nice, twisty, incestuous world.
The Macbeth role, you mean?
Yeah.
I like that idea, especially because I do think Viserys has to be murdered like Duncan, and I think that will be the inciting incident for this Targaryen civil war. But the thing I'm stuck on is that Macbeth absolutely never cares about who's king after him. It's just about preserving his reign. He doesn't have any kids. He never mentions wanting them.
And you're saying
that's
Otto...
the Banquo. That's the territory of who comes after me. My line must be king's. And Otto seemed like the example of that character. I like the idea of it like moving to the next generation, kind of aging up those slots. Viserys is becoming more of a Duncan.